You probably saw the headlines. The big UN Climate Summit, COP28, just wrapped up in Dubai, and well, it was a lot. It was called a turning point, a pivotal moment for the planet. But once the dust settled, the reactions were all over the place. So what's the real story here? Was this a genuinely historic breakthrough in the fight against climate change? Or was it, just another round of talk while the world keeps getting hotter? Let's get into it and actually unpack what went down. Okay, so to really get what was on the line in Dubai, we have to start with the basics. What even is a COP? Right. COP stands for Conference of the Parties. Just think of it as the world's biggest and most important annual meeting about climate change. It's where basically every country on Earth gets together under the UN to try and agree on a global game plan. It is, for better or worse, where the rules get written. And this number says a lot. This wasn't the first time, or the 5th time, or even the 20th time they've done this. This was the 28th COP. That one number tells a story of decades of negotiations, frustrations, and honestly, some pretty slow grinding progress. So why all the extra buzz around number 28? What made this meeting in particular so critical? Well, it's because for the very first time, the world was about to get its official report card on how we're doing. The official name for this is the Global Stocktake. It's basically a formal checkup on the big promises everyone made back in the 2015 Paris Agreement. The main one being to keep global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. This was supposed to be the big moment of truth. And the verdict? It was pretty brutal. The stocktake basically said we are critically, dangerously off track. It found that for us to have any real shot at our goals, global emissions have to peak before 2025. That's really soon. It also said we're not doing nearly enough to adapt to the changes already happening, and the money promised to help poor nations is just not showing up. So yeah, that set a pretty intense mood for the whole summit. With that urgent report hanging over everyone's heads, the talks pretty quickly focused in on the elephant in the room. The biggest source of all those emissions, and, let's be real, the most controversial topic you can imagine, the future of oil, gas, and coal. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it all came down to a battle over just a few words. You had more than 100 countries, we're talking the EU, a lot of small island nations, pushing hard for this term phase out, a clear final end to fossil fuels. But of course, the big oil-producing countries pushed back hard. In the end, they landed on this compromise, transitioning away from fossil fuels. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Transitioning away sounds a little soft, right? A bit like diplomatic jargon. But here's why it's a huge deal. This is the first time in 28 years, nearly 3 decades of these talks, that a final agreement has ever pointed the finger directly at all fossil fuels and said, we need to move away from these. For many, that alone was a historic moment. It sends a massive signal to the global economy that the fossil fuel era is officially on its way out. All right, let's shift gears to another major outcome. And this one was a much clearer win, something that people have been fighting for years. It's called the Loss and Damage Fund. Literally, on day 1 of the summit, something amazing happened. Countries started stepping up with pledges. The fund was officially launched and filled with an initial $700 million to help the world's most vulnerable countries deal with climate disasters they can no longer avoid. So how's it supposed to work? The idea is actually pretty simple. When a developing country, one that's done almost nothing to cause the climate crisis, gets hammered by something like a superstorm or a catastrophic drought, it can get help from this fund. It's a really important step towards what people call climate justice, basically recognizing that the people suffering the most are the ones least responsible. So let's recap. We've got a landmark call to move away from fossil fuels, even if it's a compromise. And we have a brand new fund to help the vulnerable. So what does that all mean? And maybe more importantly, where do we go from here? This quote here really captures the mood after it was all over. There's this feeling that, yes, it was a historic achievement to finally name the problem, but also this deep worry about the loopholes in the agreement. There's a gap between what was promised and what the science says we absolutely have to do. It was a step forward, for sure, but maybe not the giant leap the world was hoping for. And the show goes on. This process never really stops. The road from Dubai leads straight to next year's COP29 in Baku, where the main event is going to be all about money, setting a huge new goal for climate finance. And then 2025 is the next massive deadline. That's when every single country has to show up with a new, stronger climate action plan. The pressure is on. So here's the bottom line from COP28. For the very first time, the world has an official, agreed-upon plan to transition away from all fossil fuels. The signal has been sent loud and clear. But that leaves us with the one massive, defining question. The world has a plan. Does it have the will to actually follow it? That's the challenge that's going to define everything from here on out.